So, the Raimi trilogy might be the best adaptation that we have of Spider-Man, or, at the very least, the classic Spider-Man comics. So in a really bad case of comicception, the Raimi trilogy that was inspired in a comic also has its own series of comics. But how are they? Are they good? Bad? Horrible? Let's find out! Well, hi there, Spider-Dash here. So, recently I read the Spider-Man comics that are inspired on the Raimi trilogy, and they are definitely something. So, before starting the video, give me a like, be sure to click the subscribe button, and with that out of the way, let's begin!
You know, I'm something of a scientist myself.
Let's start in chronological order. The first thing that we can appreciate of the first comic is Raimi's Spider-Man in all of its glory. The art style looks similar to that of Mark Bagley. And soon enough, they give thanks to Brian Michael Bendis, writer of Ultimate Spider-Man, where Mark Bagley consolidated himself as an Spider-Man artist. So yeah, this comic was inspired mostly by Ultimate Spider-Man. And how do you need that much people to make an adaptation of the movie? Anyway, the comic starts with Spider-Man telling us that he's just your average kid, and that this story is not for the faint of heart. More or less how the movie starts. But soon enough, we see something that we didn't see in the movie, and that is a social worker dropping Peter in Uncle Ben and Aunt May's house. Next we see Peter telling us that MJ is the love of his life while she is with another man. That sure as hell is not Flash Thompson because he looks nothing like it. Then we cut to Norman telling us that,
you know, I'm something of a scientist myself.
Then we see other thing that we didn't see in the movie, and that is MJ greeting Harry and Peter. And we cut to the museum with the lady telling the students that there are like a more billion of species of spiders, and Peter then takes pictures of MJ like in the movie, but this time the scene looks more sus. Then we cut to the government agents telling Norman that they are removing their funds from Oscorp. You know, fun stuff. Then we can see that Peter got buffed after getting his powers, the cafeteria scene, and the fight with Flash Thompson is more like the ultimate version, where Flash hurts himself while fighting Peter, instead of Peter throwing a punch like in the movie. And then when Peter tries his powers for the first time, we see another thing that wasn't in the movie, and that is that he actually did a bit of web swing. Then we cut to Peter doing experiments in his room, and Norman turning into the Goblin. The new thing that we see here is that after Norman regains consciousness, he calls Harry a C student and that he doesn't need his help. Then we see another thing that wasn't in the movie, and that is that before Ben took Peter to the library, Aunt May actually went outside to say goodbye to Peter and Uncle Ben, making the outcome more sad. Then we can see that in the comic, Bonesaw's design is different and his full name is Bonesaw McGraw. In this version there is no cage, and Peter defeats Bonesaw way easier, just dodging his attacks and kicking him in the stomach. Then Peter doesn't stop the thief as always, and he finds that Uncle Ben died. He's already on a stretcher, and the doctors put a blanket on him because he was already dead. In this version he doesn't get to say goodbye. And then Peter chases the thief and kills him by accident just like in the movie. And we cut to the Green Goblin killing the Quest astronaut and the government agents. And we see other thing that wasn't in the movie, and that is Norman on a news channel giving his condolences for the things that he did. Then we cut to Peter's graduation and the city montage. In this version, Peter doesn't find the Daily Bugle's newspaper while talking with Norman. He just finds it by accident, and we can see Peter with J. Jonah Jameson directly. Then another scene that wasn't in the movie was J. Jonah Jameson changing the title of a newspaper from New York City Cheers New Hero to Fierce Costume Coward. And from here on everything plays mostly the same as in the movie. Except that after the festival scene, Norman Osborn finds a newspaper with pictures of his fight with Spider-Man. The battle in the Roosevelt Island plays mostly the same but with a few differences. Peter dodges the Green Goblin glider by moving aside instead of doing a 360. And we can see him carrying Norman's body to his house. And then before the final swing of the movie, we can see that Peter was in the Daily Bugle and he left his clothes inside the building. And the comic ends with this Marvel ad announcing some underwear with Marvel characters. God, I wish that they still made stuff like that.
Pizza time.
Now, the Spider-Man 2 comic starts the same as the movie, with our boy delivering pizzas like a boss. And he doesn't even know that it's his birthday. In this comic, everything turns out pretty much the same as the movie. and there are less differences than with the last comic, so instead of narrating the whole comic again, let's go over the difference and the new things that this comic adds to the movie. The first thing that we can appreciate that is different than in the movie is that on their way to see Dr. Octavius for the first time, Peter and Harry are discussing because Peter keeps taking pictures of Spider-Man, showing that the relationship was more tense than we thought. Actually, if you didn't know why Peter left the apartment that he was sharing with Harry, was because of the constant fights that Peter and Harry had because of Spider-Man. Then after Peter doesn't attend MJ's place because he had to stop a couple of thieves, we can see that Peter actually calls MJ twice, one from his school and another from a laundry shop. That or it was Mr. Ditkovich's basement. Then after Dr. Octavius' machine fails and Spider-Man saves the situation, Peter tries to talk to Harry but he cuts Peter off because he was mad at him and probably was taking pictures of Spider-Man. This was the turning point that ended Peter and Harry's friendship. Then after Dr. Octopus kills the doctors and finds the warehouse, we can see that there are a few homeless people living there, that probably Doc Ock killed because we don't know anything of them afterwards. Then in the party of John Jameson, after his marriage with MJ is announced, there is another scene that we didn't see in the movie, and that is Peter and MJ having a small talk about how John Jameson actually pays attention to MJ and how she felt that Peter was constantly rejecting her. But before Peter can say anything to MJ, John Jameson arrives and Peter has to leave. And then we see the same scene where Peter is swinging through the city and then loses his powers. The next detail is that while Peter is imagining himself talking to Uncle Ben, he actually gets out of the car, but falls straight into the curb. Then we cut to the scene where Peter tells Aunt May that he's responsible for Uncle Ben's death. But here he tells Aunt May this while they are on a graveyard instead of Aunt May's house. And then after some more scenes of the movie, we cut to my favorite detail in this comic, and that is that the comic tells us that Aunt May knows that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. This changes everything. Well, kinda. Then after Spider-Man stops the train and Doc Ock knocks him out and takes his body to Harry, just after Peter leaves, Harry finds out the Goblin's lair. So instead of finding this after MJ's wedding like in the movie, this happens just after Peter leaves. Then Spider-Man defeats Doc Ock and the only new detail is that Peter was doing homework for Dr. Connor's class while MJ was having her wedding. But as we know, MJ arrives and then the comic ends.
They love me.
Then we move on to Spider-Man 3, the movie prequel. I have to say that out of all the comics inspired of the Raimi trilogy, this might be my favorite. The comic starts with Peter being scared of proposing to MJ, but he's scared because he might lose his job and not being able to support MJ, or being killed and leaving MJ alone, or worse, what if MJ gets hurt because of him? Then we move to a couple of workers getting distracted because they saw Spider-Man, so in an accident, the platform where they were standing falls, but Spider-Man is able to save them. Then Peter starts to remember about Uncle Ben and Aunt May. One time that he got home from school and Uncle Ben was there way earlier than he should be. It turns out that Uncle Ben was laid off of his job, and him and Aunt May were worried about how they were going to keep supporting Peter. But then, Uncle Ben reminds Aunt May that when they first got engaged, they went through a lot of trouble together, but in the end, they had each other, and that's what matters. But just before Peter can keep reminiscing about his childhood, there is a crazy driver almost crashing on a bakery, which reminds Peter that he has to buy a ring to propose MJ. Then we cut to Flynn Marko. He was a criminal that made some money back in the day. He tells us how he impressed a young lady, and then now he has a daughter with cancer. He expresses his desire to find a real job, but he's unable to get hired because of his past as a criminal. Then we go back to Peter in a jewelry shop looking for a ring for MJ. But then Parker's luck strikes and the jewelry shop is under attack by some criminals, which at this point are just everyday stuff for Spider-Man, and he stops them without much effort. Then we go back to Flynn Marko, who tries to rob the same jewelry shop where Peter was. But as a joke of destiny, the jewelry shop is full of cops, and he just surrenders. Then the comic ends with Peter stating that no matter what happens, he will be there for MJ because she's the person that he loves the most, and that no matter what, as long as they have each other, there is nothing that they can't face together. And the comic ends with this kick-ass ad of some Spider-Man 3 toys. A really beautiful comic, more considering that this was made just to sell some tickets for Spider-Man 3, and even then respects Peter's and MJ's relationship more than recent comics. Anyway, let's go to the final comic.
You want forgiveness? Get religion.
Spider-Man 3 The Black starts just after Peter removes his black suit and the symbiote falls onto Eddie. If you notice that the art is similar to Ultimate Spider-Man, it's because in fact this was drawn by Ultimate Spider-Man's artist Mark Bagley, and not just inspired by his style. After Eddie gets the symbiote, he wants to get it off. He even wants Gwen to help him, and mostly blames Peter. Then Venom tries to attack some teenagers against his will, but he gets hit by Parker's memories that were still in the symbiote. Then he gets ambushed by a couple of cops, but he takes them down easily. Then on top of a building, Eddie looks at his hands and then sees that Peter Parker is Spider-Man, along with more memories of Peter, some including Gwen, which makes him way more furious than he was. Instead of referring to the symbiote as Venom, he refers to it as the Black. That's why the name of the comic, Spider-Man the Black. And then we can see that Venom can web swing just like Spider-Man. Then Venom goes to Gwen Stacy's home to kidnap her, but instead he finds some documents that reveal details of the death of Ben Parker and the man who killed him, Flint Marko, and he leaves without Gwen noticing it. Then he finds Sandman and offers him the same deal that we see in the movie. And then Venom goes to kidnap MJ again, just like we see in the movie. And here is revealed that the symbiote has feelings for her, and that he loves her more than Peter does. Then Sandman and Venom have a small talk about who is going to kill Spider-Man. And here is revealed that the symbiote can sense the presence of Spider-Man, because he is on his way. And the comic ends with Spider-Man in all of its glory, drawn by Mark Bagley, a delicacy if you love Bagley's art and the Raimi suit. Finally, let's talk about our conclusions about these comics. Honestly, they are not masterpieces by any means, but that doesn't mean that they are bad comics. Actually, they are great if you consider that they were made to sell more tickets and merchandise of the movies. Also, little details like Peter being dropped off on Uncle Ben and Aunt May's house when he was still a kid, Norman on a news channel, Peter doing homework from Dr. Connor's class before MJ arrived, and knowing what Venom did before the final battle are little details that adds more to the Raimi universe, and that is awesome. So, they make great collectibles. If you find one at a great price, don't even think about it. They'll be great in your Raimi collection or your Spider-Man collection in general. But that is my opinion. Tell me yours in the comment section and I'll see you in the next time. Bye bye!